Good afternoon to you. It is now 3:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Monica Crowley is with us this hour. She is a former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for the Trump administration. She'll react to the big running mate news today. Aaron Sibarium joins us from the Washington Free Beacon at 4:30 as the Kamala Harris campaign is apparently relying on suicidal people to get them across the line. And Brent Bazell is going to be with us at 5 o'clock from the Media Research Center. We'll talk about the media coverage of Kamala Harris's pick today. Tim Walz, the folksy middle American hero. The media very, very excited about this. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Here's CNN's excitement earlier today.
CNN breaking news.
And the breaking news, CNN has learned that Vice President Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. You are looking at live pictures from St. Paul, Minnesota, outside the home of the Minnesota governor right now. Let me just read you the alert as it just came in. Vice President Harris has made a decision with 4 people close to the process saying Tim Walz of Minnesota is her choice.
How theatrical and stupid is that presentation? So anyway, that's the news today on CNN, that Kamala Harris is going walls out to lose this election. That's where we are. Tim Walz, a radical lunatic, and the press, of course, is doing its solid best to dress this guy up as some sort of centrist. Did you know that he once had an A rating from the NRA? Have you heard this today? He once had an A rating. He's a hunter, you see, so he connects with those middle American white people. That's the thinking on the left today. Well, that's stupid for any number of reasons, including that Walz has come around to Kamala's position on all of this, including banning gun ownership from American citizens. In fact, he's throwing his name onto the very ticket of a woman who wants to ban gun ownership of American citizens. We need an assault weapons ban, she says. We need to get rid of long rifles. That's not what she says. She has no idea what she's talking about. But we need an assault weapons ban. That's what this guy Tim Walz is signing up for. That's what he's representing. And his record is so freaking radical that it almost makes me smile. That it almost makes me so grateful that they've decided to go with the most cartoonishly Marxist possible ticket. Again, it's not just me saying that. Today, AOC and Ilhan Omar are absolutely cheering at the pick of the Minnesota governor. They love it. They're so enthusiastic. In fact, here's what AOC posted to X earlier today. Vice President Harris made an excellent decision, and Governor Walz is her running mate. Together, they will govern effectively, inclusively, and boldly for the American people. They won't back down under tight odds either. From health care to school lunch, let's do this, says AOC. Ilhan Omar, another squad member. Congratulations to our next vice president, Tim Walz, she says. Our North Star State governor has signed universal school meals, paid family leave, and sick leave, marijuana legalization, and protections for reproductive rights into law, bringing Minnesota nice to the ticket. Okay, so let's dig in. What does it mean to be Minnesota nice in this context? What is Tim Walz's actual record? Well, let's begin here. An issue that Americans care about by very wide majorities. Illegal immigration. Where are you on the border crisis, Tim Walz? Well, Walz's position is that we need to give goodies to illegals. Goodies to illegals. Not consequences, not stop them from crossing the border, but instead that they're entitled to rewards for breaking our laws. Here's a Fox headline today. Walz backed sanctuary policies and services for illegal immigrants as governor. It's being called a, quote, win for open borders. Vice President Kamala Harris's announcement of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate has already brought fresh scrutiny to his record on immigration and border security, including his support of driver's licenses for illegal immigrants and calls to make Minnesota a sanctuary state. That's who this guy is. The Republican National Committee immediately hit him on his record, accusing him of flooding illegal immigrants with benefits. It noted Walz's creation of a, quote, Office of New Americans to help immigrants and refugees integrate into the United States. The RNC also pointed to measures that became law during Walz's time as governor. The committee highlighted his signing of a bill into law last year that allows illegal immigrants to get a driver's license. And that's not all. That's not all. You know, in May of last year, because of Tim Walz, he signed this into law. They declared that Minnesota students, illegal aliens who are Minnesota students, will now be eligible for the state's tuition-free college program. Free college tuition for illegals. Democrats used their majority in the legislature, Axios reported last year, to add a number of state benefits to, quote, non-citizens living here. Put differently, illegals. Other new laws allow people to obtain driver's licenses, as I mentioned, and access Minnesota Care, the publicly run insurance program for low-income residents, regardless of their immigration status. So what is he giving? He's giving driver's licenses for illegals, free college tuition for illegals, free health care for illegals, and he's pushing to make Minnesota a sanctuary state to protect illegals from the consequences of their own unlawful actions. That's Tim Walz on immigration. That's what he believes in. So he's going to only accelerate the border crisis that we've been experiencing, not stopping it. Imagine if that guy gets made the border czar under the Kamala Harris administration. What is that going to mean for the rest of us? Only more chaos. Only more chaos. Additionally, let's take a look at his behavior in 2020. In 2020, Tim Walz, you should know, and you probably do by now, was the governor who oversaw the George Floyd riots in that state, in Minneapolis. The George Floyd riots were raging for nearly 72 hours before the governor decided to do anything to step in. In fact, he sat back and let this all burn for a while. And then when he was called out on it, he said, oh, well, it's up to local officials to secure the area. Dude, you're in charge of the National Guard. You could have done something to rescue Minneapolis, and you didn't. You refused. In fact, here's some of the audio talking about why wasn't the National Guard ready for these out-of-control
I will
riots.
let my leadership come back up there. You're absolutely right, and I think that speaks to itself that by shortly after 10 o'clock, it became apparent that structure would go. The way this works is the mayors ask and they take charge and lead on the missions.
It's their fault.
I'll let the folks come up here said. I see that too. I think the decision made to not engage. And I want to just be clear. There's philosophically an argument to be made that an armed presence on the ground in the midst of where we just had a police killing is seen as a catalyst. My point to that is we don't need a catalyst. It's already burning. And so this is trying to strike that balance.
Excuses.
And so I am in total agreement with that. You will not see that tonight. There will be no lack of leadership, and there will be no lack of response on the table.
Now, let me just say, you know why he was talking? This was more than 3 days after the riots started burning down the city. The day you just heard him talking was the day after the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis had been burned to the ground on national television. That's what it took. Finally burning a police precinct to the ground led the governor to step up to a microphone and say, okay, maybe we'll send in the National Guard. Maybe we'll try and do something to alleviate the chaos there in Minneapolis. So that's Tim Walz. And this is an interesting ticket, isn't it? Because Kamala Harris was the one who was supporting the bail fund to free the very people who burned down the precinct. So this is kind of a I hold you punch campaign where, Tim Walz is letting everyone burn the city down, and then Kamala Harris comes flying in to release them from jail. That's who they are. They're radicals. Now together on a ticket. How amazing is that? So they didn't go with, Mark Kelly in Arizona, the astronaut. They didn't go with him. They didn't they're not going for a swing state. They didn't go for Josh Shapiro in another battleground state, Pennsylvania guy. You know why they didn't go for him? He's Jewish. And they've been crystal clear about this in all of the days leading up to this decision. I got headline after headline being served to me by the left-wing media. They weren't sure that Josh Shapiro would be a good pick because too many Democrats are anti-Semitic. He's a Jewish guy. Too many Democrats are anti-Semitic, so we can't go with him. And so who do they go with? They go with a full-blown left-wing lunatic. And it really goes to show you they don't care about middle America. There's not a single element of this that is designed to appeal to independent or centrist voters. Now, the media is dressing this up today as if this guy is in any sense a centrist. Nancy Pelosi went on television earlier today to declare that, people who say that he's left-wing, that's not true. He's not left-wing. He's very in the middle. Sure, Nancy Pelosi. Sure. I believe you. She's from San Francisco. It's like her voters poop on her front step, and then she's still with them. She really does not have meaningful perspective here. She lies to you. She lies to you. But they decided this is a base election for them. To the extent that they care at all about what the voters actually think, they've decided, you know what? We're going to suck up to the most left-wing elements of our base. And let me add one other point before I get back to the policy from Tim Waltz. Tim Waltz should be hanging his head in shame today that he was a DEI pick by Kamala Harris. He was chosen not because he was the best candidate. He was chosen because he's a white guy. How do I know that? Because literally every day leading up to this moment, the short list of people that Kamala Harris was seriously considering, we kept being told, including the group of people that she met with over the weekend, all white dudes. White dude, white dude, white dude, white dude. The one exception was Gretchen Whitmer, who was a white chick, and she was only thrown in to throw you off the scent. But it was a white dude campaign. That's it. And the reason for that is because the left has such a low regard for the American voter that they believe that voters won't show up unless a white dude is on the ballot. So Tim Walz is a DEI pick for this role. Don't get it twisted. That's exactly what he's there for. In addition, he's there to help advance the radical cause that the left believes in. How else is this manifesting itself? Well, let's see. So we've got the open borders chaos, the goodies for the illegals. We've got this the George Floyd riots, which he breathed all sorts of life into and didn't put down when he should have, leaving the people of Minneapolis in an even greater state of desperation. During COVID, he was the guy who was advocating that you snitch on your neighbors to punish them. So if they weren't following the COVID laws, locking down the entire state, well, then you get to be crushed. And in fact, he asked for people to call into a snitch line to help make that happen. Here is the sound. This is the actual audio of the snitch line. If you were a citizen of Minnesota and you wanted to call the snitch line, here's what it sounded like.
Hello, you have reached the Department of Public Safety stay-at-home hotline. The information you leave is considered public information. At the tone, please leave the following information: your name, your callback number, how the stay-at-home order is being violated, and where the stay-at-home order was violated. Thank you.
Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press pound for more options.
That's it. So you could call into the snitch line, and apparently thousands of people, left-wingers, decided to call in and snitch on their neighbors. The Daily Wire with a piece on this today saying Walz implemented the COVID hotline to snitch on neighbors. In March of 2020, his administration implemented a hotline encouraging people to snitch who weren't following the government's COVID lockdown orders. The hotline generating thousands of reports against people playing basketball, walking their dogs, attending church, all according to local outfit Alpha News reporting that in 2022. Walz's administration continued to monitor the hotline until November of 2020. It did remain operational at least until June of 2022, like every government program. It goes on for an eternity. In one example of a complaint, someone alerted authorities to a church service that wasn't following Walz's legal requirements. A church service. Quote, I'm aware that the Apostolic Lutheran Church at this address is planning to hold church services October 2nd through the 4th, said the caller. Hundreds are expected, and they will be serving meals in the church dining hall. I don't believe this fits with legal requirements, and I'm aware that multiple families that attend this church currently have coronavirus. Snitch. Snitch. In order to advance a tyrannical regime led by, who? Oh, that's right, the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, who's now on the ticket alongside Kamala Harris. These people are crazy, and I've got a lot more for you, and I've got your calls coming up. We got a big show today. 3:20 now. The file on Tim Walz is extensive. I have so much information to share with you today on just how radical this guy is. In fact, coming up, we're gonna talk about this quite a bit more with the Trump campaign. Monica Crowley is going to stop by. We've got a lot to discuss on this subject, but let me first go to the phones. I've got Chris calling in from Thurmont, line 2. Chris, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, how are you?
I'm doing well, Chris. What's on your mind?
This is like a reunion of the summer of love of 2020 with Waltz and Kamala back together again. And I'm actually ecstatic about the pick. And I will tell you why, because this guy has more bad baggage than Sam Brinton.
That's a lot of bad baggage to have. That's a good line.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's you may be aware of some of these stories that are popping up. I want to get into more detail about some of them, but we're finding out about all the scandals in this guy's past, including the fact that it turns out there's a bunch of soldiers from the National Guard who had served with him in the early 2000s who are now saying that he actually, the second he found out that he was going to be about to be deployed to Iraq, he quit the National Guard and he left his men behind. And all of them are furious about this and are now trying to tell this story in public, want people to know exactly who this guy is.
Yeah, and as a former tank commander, that is one of the most cowardly maneuvers I can tell you anybody ever made.
Yeah. Have you seen any of this on Tim Walz about how he ducked out just before his Iraq deployment yet?
Yeah, apparently he was supposed to be elevated to a command sergeant major and just died out. Yeah, I heard a little bit about that story, but I've also heard about a DUI that's kind of in the limbo. And
He had a DUI from the 90s. In somewhere in the mid 90s, he was doing. He was up where near 100 miles an hour, driving in a 55 mile per hour zone, hammered. Got a DUI back then, but now we've got these concerns about him skipping out on these guardsmen. I'm going to play some audio coming up from the guy who ended up replacing him, who stepped up to the plate and actually was deployed to Iraq. And this whole thing about him being a command sergeant major, that was conditional. He had gone to school, apparently, and as a product of going to that school, they said you have to serve a certain length of time as a command sergeant major. Instead, he quit so he wouldn't be deployed to Iraq, and he had his rank reduced to master sergeant upon leaving the National Guard. But he's been going around telling everybody that he retired a command sergeant major, and that apparently is not the case.
I think that's called stolen valor, my friend.
That's what that's what the guys who served with him are saying too. So that'll be a fascinating feature of this campaign if the media is ever going to give it the time of day. I know I will, and we'll keep talking about it here. Hey, Chris, thank you very much for the call.
Keep up the good fight.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. All right. Hey, coming up, we'll get into this some more with Monica Crowley. A lot to discuss with her on what exactly is going on with this Tim Walz pick, what it means for the campaign trail, who they're really trying to appeal to with it, and just how deeply radical he is. We have barely scratched the surface here. You know, they thought that they could take out J.D. Vance by reading passages from his book, literally making up passages from his book. Oh, he's so weird. Really? This Walz character? He wants tampons in the boys' room. He made his state a sanctuary for mutilating children. You want to talk about weird? This guy's straight up wicked. And he just joined a major presidential campaign. All of the details continue on the Vince Coglianese Show. Stay with us. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:35. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up today, Aaron Sibarium from the Washington Free Beacon joins us at 4:30. Then from the Media Research Center, Brent Bazell is here at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Just moments ago, Kamala Harris has released a video on her campaign account of herself, of course, calling Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota to deliver the bad news. Take a listen.
Hi, this is Tim.
It's Kamala Harris. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Madam Vice President.
Listen, I want you to do this with me. Let's do this together. Would you be my running mate and let's get this thing on the road?
I would be honored, Madam Vice President.
The joy that you're bringing back to the country, the enthusiasm that's out there.
By the way, they both have cameras on them, just so you know. There's nothing impromptu about the call.
It'll be a privilege to take this with you across the country.
Well, let me tell you, I have just the utmost respect for you. I have really enjoyed our work together. You understand our country. You have dedicated yourself to our country in so many different and beautiful ways. And we're going to do this. We're going to win. And we're going to unify our country and remind everyone that we are fighting for the future for everyone. So let's get out there and get this done, okay?
let's do it. Do the work in front of us. Let's win this thing.
That's right. All right, buddy. I'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
A phony call for a phony campaign. Unbelievable. Let's talk about all the beautiful things that Tim Walz has done to this country so far. Joining us right now is the host of the Monica Crowley podcast and a former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, Monica Crowley. Monica, great to have you back with us.
Hey, Vince, great to be back. Thank you for having me.
Tim Walz, the media telling me today that he is very folksy and very accessible, and he's going to really appeal to middle America. What do you think of that?
Well, I did a whole monologue on my podcast today about this, how they're going to try to sell him as Minnesota nice. You know, Mr. Midwest, moderate, nice guy, nothing to be afraid of. This guy is the most radical pick for the vice presidency in American history. So right now you've got the most radical vice president in American history choosing the most radical vice presidential candidate in American history on everything from the no borders policy to waving in masses of illegal immigrants and wanting to give them incredible benefits like health care and education that they all want us to pay for, all the way up to abortion on demand until the moment of birth. Every single thing about Tim Walz screams radical. And frankly, when you look even more closely at both Kamala and Tim Waltz, Vince, what you see is that they are very committed Marxists who are totally invested in the left's deliberate destruction of the country.
What do you think this is as a political matter? Because there were other people on the table who actually are in swing states. The theory was that she would try and go for a battleground state, like a Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania or a Mark Kelly from Arizona. What does this pick tell you about their strategy?
Well, it tells me a couple of things. First of all, the absolute state of the Democrat Party, where you cannot, you know, there are very few moderates left. We used to call them blue dog Democrats.
Right.
There may be one or two of them left. And even the one that's left, like Senator Manchin out of West Virginia, he posted this glowing review of Tim Walz this morning on X, like, oh, he's incredible. He's going to bring the country back. He's a unifier.
Gross.
That is all nonsense. So it tells you that the Democrat Party is so far left that it has embraced Marxism. It is a revolutionary party. And so you have somebody at the top of the ticket now and at the number two who believe in that, and that it makes it impossible to choose a more centrist, such as they are, but a more centrist kind of character. The other thing it tells me here, Vince, is that the Democrat Party is now the party of Hamas. It is a largely an anti-Israel, anti-Semitic party, or at least has huge influential elements that embrace those things. And those elements made it very difficult to choose the better choice, which would have been Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, obviously a critical swing state. Shapiro would have been very helpful to Kamala Harris and the Democrats in this regard, but the Hamas wing of the party would simply not allow it because he is Jewish. Now, I know there were other elements that went into this calculation, but that is the overriding reason, and that tells you the absolute state of the Democrat Party.
Yes, it does. And I can't tell you the number of headlines I saw leading up to today where the media were talking openly about this. Well, Josh Shapiro might be a problem. He's Jewish. Do any of these people hear themselves as they offer that explanation in public that, oh, yeah, the Democrats are too anti-Semitic to go for him?
You know, it's unbelievable to me as a student of history and particularly World War II and the Holocaust that here we are in the 21st century, Vince, and we have one major party in America that's like, well, we can't choose the optimal guy because he's a Jew. I mean, this is absolutely mind-boggling to me and completely appalling, upsetting, and unacceptable. And any Jewish voter in this country should take a look at this, be outraged and appalled, and consider Donald Trump.
Monica Crowley, one of the other things about the VP selection process, now that it's concluded, but worth looking back at, is that they only chose from among white men. They were really explicit that it has to be a white guy because they were convinced that voters are too racist and sexist to go with any other option. That's their contempt for the voter coming out. Why shouldn't Tim Waltz walk away realizing that he's a DEI pick here?
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it and totally accurate, Vince. the white guy at the number 2 position of the ticket is a DEI. Look, there are all kinds of calculations that go into a vice presidential pick, geography, beliefs, compatibility with the person at the top, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But they view everything through the lens of identity politics. Your race, your gender, your religious beliefs, et cetera. That's how they view you and the country and the world. So that is what went into this. And I think that they believe this country is so racist, they can't take 2 women. So Gretchen Whitmer was out of the running.
Right.
The country can't take, 2 people of color. So forget that. And, there was some consideration about Pete Buttigieg, which I think there was somebody very high up in the Democrats, maybe it was Hillary Clinton, but there was somebody very prominent among the Democrats pushing Pete Buttigieg. And I guess the calculation is, the country is homophobic, too, so we can't have that. So you get the standard issue Marxist white guy out of Minnesota.
The standard issue Marxist white guy. It's amazing, isn't it? And so let's talk about some more of these positions. The claim was that he had an A rating at one point with the NRA, but I'm seeing today the NRA is releasing statements going, this guy's a political chameleon. Those are their words. He changed his positions to further his own personal agenda. He purported in Congress to be a friend of gun owners to receive their support in his rural Minnesota district. Once he had his eyes set on other offices, he sold out law-abiding Minnesotans and promoted a radical gun control agenda. So the one area where I'm seeing the left today, including Nancy Pelosi, saying, this guy is a centrist. He's no left-winger. Guns. It turns out even that's a lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're seeing it at the top of their ticket, too, with Kamala Harris, who is running away from her really radical positions on fracking and so many other things because she knows it's going to sink her. The country is still center-right. Washington, D.C., the Democrat Party has gone really Marxist left, but the country itself is still center-right. So you're going to see this guy say, look, I embrace the Second Amendment and all of these things. It's not true. He is a chameleon as well. And, there's another big point to all of this, Vince, which is it used to be we have 50 states and every governor and every state house, every legislature sort of did their own thing because they did what they were supposed to do, which is reflect the views and the wishes of their immediate constituents, right? So It was possible to have, maybe a far left president, but, you'd have governors around the country who were Democrats who were more middle of the road. What's happened over the last, 20, 30 years is that everything has become nationalized and it's all become federalized. So there is no such thing anymore as sort of a go your own way, centrist Democrat governor, for example. They all embrace the national agenda of the Marxists at the very top because they know if they don't, they're going to be sidelined, they're going to be marginalized, they're not going to get what they want. So they're all, and maybe a lot of them are true believers as well. So all of them now across the country, no matter what state they're in, they're embracing the national, very radical agenda, and that also applies to Tim Waltz.
Yeah, we're watching. That's true for Democrats. That's not true for Republicans, by the way. There's lots of Republican governors, or several at least, who are perfectly happy to kick dirt in the face of the National Republican Party and still call themselves Republicans. Larry Hogan comes to mind. It's just like I don't. It's funny how the left has established this uniformity of purpose and certainly of tyranny. Meanwhile, the right fights amongst themselves.
Yeah, I know. The Republicans, conservatives, we've always been a bit of a hot mess. We've always been right on all of the issues, but in terms of unity and trying to keep everybody on message and everybody on board, it has been a struggle. Now, the argument has been, that's healthy. We want these debates. And while that is true, for the last several decades, we have been fighting a war for the future of this country, Vince, and only one side has been fighting it. The Democrats, the left, the Marxists, right? So while we've had these internal squabbles and we're trying to tell ourselves these debates are healthy, and I guess they are to some extent, the left has been totally united, fighting the war for the future of the country and really the West. And they've been winning these battles because they crack the whip and keep everybody in line. And they do it through intimidation. They do it through really using their leverage against individual members. Nancy Pelosi was excellent at herding the cats and keeping everybody in line. Our side, not so much. Right. And that's why, because we have power in numbers, but we haven't really been organized the way the left has.
Monica Crowley, as such a good student of politics, what do you think the debate looks like between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm very eager to see it. Tim Walz is a bit older than J.D. Vance, but remember, Walz had been in Congress for 6 terms. He served 12 years in Congress, and now he's on his second term as governor. So very steeped in policy, very steeped in the ways that government works, very steeped in the art of the spin. So don't underestimate his performance. Yes, he is a radical, and I think JD is going to dismantle him in terms of his radical policy positions, what he's embraced both in Congress and in the State House in Minnesota. But, don't underestimate his ability to just sort of push through. JD, I think, is going to be excellent. He's going to win on the issues. But Waltz knows how to charm and how to maneuver a debate situation. So it's going to be very interesting.
And J.D. Vance is getting sharper by the day. With each public appearance, he's doing it better and better, I can tell, very quickly. You have, with Walz, you bring up an interesting point. He is steeped in policy. He's had a lot of time in Washington. He's a much better communicator than Kamala Harris, that's for sure. Do you think that's one of the reasons she chose him, because she's incapable of handling these types of candid conversations, and maybe Walz could step up to the plate to convey her radical ideology?
Yeah, I think, sort of the beauty of any number 2 is that the number 1 can just foist off. Remember was it a Larry David episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, foisting? You foist this person off on someone. Yeah. It's a very funny concept, but I think in politics it's very useful to have a number 2 that you can foist onto, various interviews, press conferences, things that you do not want to do. You can turn to the number 2. And Waltz is a more effective communicator than Kamala, who's all over the map.
Yes.
And this is why they're not sending her into uncontrolled environments, right?
Yes.
So I think she's going to rely on him a lot to deal with the press, to hold these kinds of unscripted events, and she'll do more of the rally type things where she's got teleprompters in front of her and it's more tightly controlled.
I mean, if that's the strategy, what it signals is that they realize this is a massive weakness for their campaign, because the right is correctly pointing out that Kamala Harris has not done any press conferences, no interviews. They're hiding her, all scripted events only. This is a basement campaign again. So their campaign is probably going to point to, oh no, but the running mate, Tim Walz, he's doing all sorts of things. So the campaign has spoken on the subject. We've mixed it up with reporters. You should be satisfied by that.
Right. Yes, exactly. I think they're going to try it. I'm not convinced it's going to work. I think, in 2020, they leveraged COVID to keep Biden in the basement. He was senile then, but they tightly controlled everything and they had a good excuse. This time they don't. And she has been vice president now for 3.5 years. She owns the entire historic catastrophe of the Biden-Harris administration. She's going to have to defend it. I'm not convinced we're going to see a Trump-Harris debate. I think she's too afraid of Fox News. I think she's afraid of Bret Baier and Martha McCallum. And in that case, how are you going to deal with President Xi and the Iranian Ayatollahs with a nuclear bomb? But that's separate. I don't think you're going to see a debate because they don't want to send her into a situation with a fierce fighter like Donald Trump, who's got the record to run on, very positive record, and it was also very unpredictable. They don't want to take that chance. That would be a very high risk, high reward situation for Kamala, and I'm not so sure they want to do that.
Yes.
So I think they're going to lean very heavily on Waltz. I think you're right.
Yeah. All right, Monica Crowley, thank you. Yeah, you're totally right. Kamala Harris is the one who's like shaking in her boots at the idea of a debate, and that can't be pointed out enough. Thank you, Monica. Great to talk to you today. All right, let's go to line 6. That's where we find Clark in North Carolina. Clark, you're on the Vince Colonnade Show.
Hey, great show, as always.
Thank you, Clark.
To say, just what a great country we live in. Where else can you go from DUI to DEI? And so that's why I'm balls to the walls for Kamala Sutra Harris.
There you go, all the way. That's hilarious. Yeah, Walls out for a losing campaign. Yeah, he went from, you're right, he went from DUI to now DEI pick for Kamala Harris. That's perfect. That's a perfect summation, Clark. I appreciate the call from the Tar Heel State. Let's go to Nick calling in from Huntingtown now, line 7. Nick, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, great show as always. And I do have to agree with Monica. Waltz is a great number 2. She is riding the high right now. She's trying to pull a con on her base and saying, hey, don't believe what I say. Look at what I'm doing by selecting him. And I think what she's going to do, they're trying to rebrand her. So this is a joke, but, wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't come out and say, I'm anti-abortion and AR in every house. But if the country's stupid enough to elect her, the curtain is going to come be pulled back, and it's going to be a friggin' disaster.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Comma chameleon is the phrase, and she's proving it with each passing day. They're running away from old positions, swearing to you that they're not going to be crazy people. That's funny. She just chose one of the craziest single Americans to join her ticket, Tim Walz, today. I've got more details on that coming up. We've also got to get into an effort in Pennsylvania to register suicidal people to vote. One would assume they mean for Democrats. Aaron Siberium from the Free Beacon's got the details on that crazy story. That's ahead.